So as we all know, the season's about to come to an end, and as it looks right now, it's now or never for Ja Morant. So the Grizzlies overall, their last 10, they went about 4-6, which isn't the greatest record because they had to finish off their season with like one of the toughest schedules. But the Warriors, mistakenly or not, did what I want them to do tonight. So they lost to the Spurs tonight off a Harrison Barnes game winner, and now the Warriors are the 7th seed, and that moved Memphis up to 6 because everybody think it was Denver, the Clippers, the Warriors, and the Grizzlies. They were all tied at 47-32. The Warriors took that loss. They dropped to 7th. Memphis moved up to 6. And what really starred it all with Ja Morant, it's now or never with him, is because they fired Taylor Jenkins, and I think that was a sign of basically the team saying we are changing ship, we're changing direction subtly, not fully. And I think in the off season they're waiting until after the playoffs this year to see what direction they want to take. And it's all up to Ja Morant because he's been to a lot of controversy obviously over the past couple seasons. More recently, it's the gun situation where he got fined, which wasn't really a big deal. I think they're doing too much. But, the problem with Ja Morant is his availability. And then, obviously, I think the antics are starting to get to the team. They don't want him doing all that. And it's crazy because at one point, a few seasons ago, before, the whole firearm incident, Ja Morant was viewed as a potential face of the league. And nowadays it's just no, it's just Ja Morant. So what? Who cares? And it's kind of crazy, how we moved on from Ja Morant being the face of the league because he still has that potential in him. This season it's kind of been a little bit of a down year, but overall, Memphis as a whole, they played pretty well. And that's all due in part to Ja Morant's play. But right now, he's kind of put in a bad situation because Memphis is the 6th seed. They would face the Lakers right now in the first round. Because the Warriors, I think they're happy at 7th. They're going to keep that 7th spot because they want Houston in the first round. So, unfortunately, Memphis is going to have to most likely face LA in the first round. And, I think all of us can say that LA is probably going to win that series. Now, I don't think Memphis would necessarily look to move Ja Morant if they lost that series, unless it was just embarrassing fashion or if he got injured in the series and they say let's cut our losses and trade him when he's at his highest value. But it's a bad situation, but Ja Morant's gonna have to perform. You're gonna have to make it a series, even possibly upset against the Lakers because it's now or never for him. I think depending on how Memphis does against LA in the first round, because let's be real, they're not making it out. That's how they'll gauge how they move in the offseason. Maybe they see something they like. It was actually a good series, went 6 or 7 games. It was really close. And, they look to add more to the team to get Ja Morant some help because they're in this mix right now. They're in between being young and then having experience. Their big three, Jaren Jackson, Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, those guys, they've been in the league for a couple years. They have some experience. And then they have all these young guys, Zach Edey, not Jake LaRavia, what's his name? Santi Aldama, Gigi Jackson, Jalen Wells, Scottie Pippen Jr. They still have that young core, and that's basically what makes up their whole team. And I think depending on what they see this year in the playoffs, Memphis is willing to move on from some of that young core to maybe get a piece like Michael Porter Jr. I see him being trade piece in the offseason. Maybe Denver doesn't perform as well as they thought they would, and now they're looking to shop Michael Porter Jr. But if Ja Morant doesn't perform, if he gets injured in these playoffs, I generally do see a scenario where Memphis is comfortable moving on from Ja Morant. 2 possible teams off the top of my head, I generally think Memphis could convince themselves that Trae Young's the guard that they need from Atlanta. They could do a swap there, because for years now, the Hawks, they might start looking to move into a new direction. Another team, the Hornets, maybe, swap Ja Morant from LaMelo Ball straight up. They're both injury prone. They're both a little immature. Maybe two sceneries, swapping them for each other. Maybe that's what they need in order to get them into the right direction of where, people want them to go. And, nothing's impossible. After that Luka trade, nothing's impossible. So, I believe it's now or never for Ja Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies. And, it sucks that they have to go against LA in the first round, but it's up to Ja Morant whether or not they do good. Memphis builds off the playoff series, gets Ja Morant more of a experienced core around them, and they go into next season with their heads held up high. Or we might see a possible scenario where, they lose in the first round in embarrassing fashion. Ja Morant gets injured, and we see him on a different team in another jersey next year. But let me know in the comment section what y'all think. Maybe, I'm overreacting, but I generally do feel like, I think it's now or never for Ja Morant to see who he really is as a player.